Hi guys, and welcome to the channel. Hillbilly Military Modeling here, and we are continuing our build on this Soviet light tank BT-7 by Zvezda in 1/35th scale. So this is the build part 2. So if you haven't seen part 1, go see that. So, quick recap here of everything we accomplished in the first video. Kind of catch us up where we're at so that we can pick up and do some more detailing. We're going to do some more detailing just a little bit in this video. If you remember, we did our toolboxes in the last, and so we're going to look at these jacks. So these jacks have these funnel shaped brackets that they slid down into. And they're actually supposed to have a retainer, a strap of metal that's it's fixed by some threaded studs. At least that's what I saw in the pictures. So we're going to glue these on, and then I'm just going to locate carefully with my X-Acto knife where I intend to place our studs that are supposed to hold these on. And once that's marked, we will take a drill bit, and so I'm just going to match up the drill bit size to the stretch sprue that we're going to use, and we're just going to drill us a couple of little divots to accept our stretch sprue, and that'll represent the threaded dowels that were actually in place on the original vehicle. So we just cut us off a little section, a little bit of Tamiya extra thin, and we'll just stick those right in place. So the benefit of drilling a hole in that polystyrene strip that we put on is that we have an actual locator and a receiver, for lack of a better word, to put our stretch sprue into. So we're just going to line this up, and I know I got a little glue on that one, but that's most of that's going to get cut off anyway, and that'll just clean right up. That's not a problem. So we got to do the other side. So now it's time to trim these retaining straps, I guess, metal pieces to length. So we're going to kind of want to make those uniform. All right, so we're going to trim those off so that they're both the same length. Now I did bend this one just a little bit. Yep. So just push it back up. The Tamiya extra thin made it kind of soft. So we're going to take another strip of polystyrene sheet here, and I want to drill 4 holes in it, spaced apart. And we're going to use the exact same drill bit, and I'm going to drill a hole in this wooden block here. And you're probably thinking, you're supposed to be building a model, why are you drilling a hole in a wooden block? So be patient, I'll show you. So we take our drill bit, we place it in the wooden block, and now we can slide our strip that we've drilled holes in over top of it. That's going to hold everything into place. So you're probably wondering, what are you doing? And I kind of wondered that myself when I was doing it, but on the original vehicle they had wing nuts that held the retaining straps in place for the jacks. Well, I can't as of yet make those, but I can make these little square nuts right here, just like you've seen. So we go ahead and we make up 4 of these, and I kind of look at it like the the mechanic out in the field had a piece of metal, you know, the tank crew have lost their wing nuts, and a drill bit and a tap, and voila, you have a replacement. So I think that theory will work. So that's what I would do. So next we have our spare tracks, and we're going to continue on with this stretched sprue theme and use those to mount the spare tracks. So the instructions doesn't show anything to mount these on. You just glue them up and stick them on, but it doesn't seem quite right. So we will trim these to length. And what I did here is the same method that I did for the jacks, the retaining pieces. The only difference is I actually took the time to make a 6-sided nut. Now these might be slightly out of scale, but they are pretty small. Since it's white polystyrene against the green, they kind of stand out quite a bit. I'm hoping that when I get some paint on it, they won't look so big. I don't know. I may do something about that. I don't know. You guys let me know in a comment. Do you think these nuts are too big or not? Are my nuts too big? I'm sorry. That's just wrong. So, anyway, we're going to move on. So, next up we have our turret. So, yeah, there are issues on the bottom side of the bustle of the turret, and just a little bit on the front. Nothing that a little bit of filler and sanding can't take care of. We also have a big sink mark on the elevation barrel, and also on our periscope. Yeah, I know it's pretty annoying, but that's kind of the way that is. So we just fill those, let that dry. In the meantime, we need to drill out the end of the barrel on our main armament. So I always use the X-Acto knife to center it first, and then I go ahead and drill that out. So the important thing here is to make sure that you get it deep enough that it will create enough depth and shadow when we get this thing painted up, that it just doesn't look like a shallow hole. And with most other items on this tank, the hatches don't really want to fit very well. I know it can be annoying, but see, I actually really enjoy this. The fitting of the parts and everything. It's probably what attracts me to these models. So this piece that I'm pointing to, the instructions doesn't show us putting this on the turret at all. So I located it's actually on the sprue. So I did some research, and that part right there is an armored housing for our antenna. So there's supposed to be a post in the center of this, and attached to the top of that post is a piece of conduit. Now I've made this conduit already out of stretched sprue, but it's supposed to connect up to the rear center of our horizontal antenna. And I think that's kind of an important detail. I don't know why they didn't include that in the kit. So we're going to have to stretch some sprue for the center. So what I'm using here is a T-light. And if you don't have a T-light, you should get a T-light. Everybody needs a T-light. So I'm just going to heat the sprue up. So I'm kind of heating up a large area of sprue here. And by doing that and slowly stretching the sprue, we can get a more consistent diameter that is a thicker diameter. So when you're stretching your sprue, don't have your piece that you're working with over top of the flame. I'm actually to the side. I'm not over top of it. So we just stretch it slowly and we'll get a consistent thick piece of sprue stretched out. Now if you want a real thin piece of sprue, just heat a small area and stretch it fast and you'll get a real thin piece. So anyway, I'm just sizing it up here, figuring out how tall I want to cut it. So I'm going to cut it long and then glue it into place. And then we can attach the conduit that goes to the antenna. So I did file down the ends of the conduit a little bit. That's what it kind of looked like in the reference photos that I saw. So there are two versions of this tank. Version 1 is with the tracks stowed on the fenders, and version 2 is with the tracks installed. And we also have our spare or auxiliary fuel tanks. And I think I like my tank with the tracks actually installed, so we're going to go with that version. So since we're going to use these auxiliary fuel tanks for extended range without refueling, we're going to install these. We're going to use these. So I'm using a file here to kind of round the corners off because these tanks were removable. They weren't part of the fender. They were just an accessory. So we need to actually make it look like something that sits on top of the fender and not something made into the fender. So we file and buff that off, and then also in reference photos there are these crescent shaped indentions on the bottom of these fuel tanks. And that may have been for the crew to be able to put their hands up underneath the tank to move them. So we're just going to file that in with a round file there. So the one forward is nearly underneath the fill neck, and the one in the rear was underneath the center section. So, and we'll do that to all 4 of the fuel tanks that are supplied with the kit. So next up, we're just going to install these. I looked at a lot of reference material on the internet and in some books, and I really couldn't tell if these tanks were, if the fill necks were facing one another, or if they were away from one another, or if it was just a mixture. So I'm just going to go with the instructions that Zvezda has provided. They showed in the illustration with the fill caps being opposite of one another. So that's what we're going to do. So before we put our tracks on, we need to kind of look at this right here, which is these pins easily fall out on my particular model. And we don't want our road wheels falling off while we're messing with Lincoln length tracks. So what I'm going to do to fix these in place is I'm just going to use this liquid mask. And that will hold it in place temporarily so that we can remove them later. And the liquid mask is easy to peel off, so it's not an issue. So it won't be in the way later on when we go to actually do the final assembly. So one of the details that I need to work on right here is that these holes that are in each one of these track shoes are not really uniform. Some of them are kind of closed off and, you know, molding issues. So we're just going to drill all these out. Now the plastic is really soft for these tracks and kind of flexible, so it drills really easy. It doesn't take no time to do this. As you can see here, I've done 3 or 4 shoes. So we're going to cut off just enough track lengths to do one side. I just want to do one side at a time, and I don't have to worry about losing bits and pieces for the other side. Some Tamiya extra thin sprue cutters would have worked out really good right here. That's on my Christmas list. So, in case you're wondering. So next up, we're going to sand in between the individual links on the end here to remove some flash from the molding process. I know it's kind of annoying, but you know, it actually goes really quick. So I'm just using a piece of Tester's modeling sandpaper and just fold it up, and it fits really nice into the groove. Also, we need to sand off the sprue gates, connection points on the tracks, and the seam line that the molds left, and that goes really quick. So here I'm about to put that link on upside down. So when you're dealing with these links, make sure that you've got it right side up, because once you glue all this track together and put it on the vehicle, it's going to be a problem. If it's the piece with the center guide, you're not going to get that upside down, but every other link on this type of track is just a flat piece of track. It doesn't have a center guide. So you're going to want to pay attention to that. So I am using a ruler to get everything straight. And as you can see here, we didn't do too bad of a job with our sanding, because everything kind of doesn't really snap together, but it all goes together, so minimum effort there. So what we're going to do is take this Tamiya extra thin cement and just put a little bit right on the connection point and let the capillary action pull the cement down into the joint, and that's where we've connected up each of the individual track lengths and then the length portions. So in this method of installing this type of track, we're going to let that set up for 3 or 4 minutes. I do not recommend letting it set up longer than, say, 4 minutes, because we do need it flexible. We don't want it to try to uncurl. So here on this instructions, I have marked a link. These tracks are too long, so we're gonna remove that particular link. And I have pre-shaped our tracks so that it'll be easier to tuck them in underneath the fender. It's so much easier if you start to curl up on the end of the tracks before you try to install them than trying to curl it all up, you know, on the vehicle. Because they're going to kind of want to spring away from the road wheels and the drive sprockets. So what I'm doing here is I'm using paint bottles and panel liner and anything heavy to kind of block it in and hold it in position so that the glue can finish setting up without it springing away from our idler and our drive sprocket. So the next portion that we need to work with is going to be the top section, the top run of our tracks. Same thing here. It's only 3 pieces, so we only have 2 joints to worry about. And we'll just give that a minute to set up. So we're going to install this, but we're not going to glue it to the other track section. And the reason why is because we just want to make sure that the length is correct and that we've got the proper track sag. And that's the thing about Christie suspension tanks, is that they always had sag in the tracks, and that's kind of a feature for models. You're going to want to get that kind of right. So after that's set up for about a half an hour, you know, you can just go eat dinner or whatever, and then come back to it. We're going to take the tracks off. So we remove the top run first. And now we're going to remove the rest of the tracks. being careful because it can still be a little bit pliable. So now we're done with the tank, so we can just set the vehicle aside. And we're going to finish up the tracks. So what we're going to do here is we're going to attach one end of the top run. Just using a little bit of Tamiya extra thin for that. And you really don't have to use a whole lot of glue, so just a little bit. And we're going to want to make sure that at this connection point that the track is straight. The hinge point is not, I don't know, how do you say that? The track is uneven, I guess. And we're going to let that end that we just glued dry completely. Or strong enough anyway, so that when we glue the other end of it, it doesn't come apart. So we glue up the other end and we make sure everything is completely dry. And then we can go back and install. So this is going to be the method that I'm going to use for my final installation too. I mean, you can do this a couple of ways. You can glue the road wheels to the tracks, but it's so much easier to paint and do chipping and weathering and all that stuff if you don't have to worry about track color versus road wheel color. It's just easier to paint if all these pieces are separate. So this method right here is what I'm going to use to install these tracks. I'm not going to glue the wheels to the tracks, at least, you know, not until the model's finished. I may do it in the end, I don't know. I might do it accidentally. So if you remember, we removed one link and we did it up next to idler. So the idler actually hides the fact that there are two track shoes with center guides next to each other. And that's why I chose that location to remove the extra track length that made it too long. Nobody will ever know. You don't tell anybody, I won't. And then all we need to do now is just go ahead and put our axle pins in. And that'll hold everything in place. All right, so that will conclude our building of our Soviet light tank BT-7. And I really enjoyed building this kit. It gave me plenty of room to do modifications and do some scratch building. And I actually enjoy fitting parts together and doing a little bit of research. These old kits, for the price and everything, they give us a lot of room to be actual modelers and not just assemblers. And I really like that. So our next video will be painting our little BT-7 here. And you're not going to want to miss that. So a big thank you to all my subscribers. I appreciate your support. If you're not a subscriber, but you like what you see in these videos, why not go ahead and subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of my new videos. And if you like this this video, please do me a favor and hit that like button. That'll kind of help us out with the YouTube algorithm. As always, feel free to leave me a comment in the comment section. I would love to hear from you. And give me whatever ideas and comments, whatever you're thinking about the build. I'd love to hear that. So in the meantime, guys, stay safe, and I will see you in the next video.